Marcus Chen limped through the sprawling junkyard, his mechanical leg clicking softly against the metal debris scattered across the ground. The morning sun cast long shadows between towering piles of discarded starship parts, broken rovers, and twisted alien technology that nobody could identify anymore. At 73, Marcus had seen enough wars to fill several lifetimes, but these daily walks through the yard kept his mind sharp and his body moving. The junkyard stretched for miles in every direction, a graveyard of dreams and failed expeditions. Earth's rapid expansion into space had created mountains of waste, and this particular yard specialized in alien salvage. Most of it was worthless scrap, but occasionally Marcus found something interesting enough to sell to the research stations orbiting Mars. Today felt different, though. A metallic glint caught his eye from beneath a collapsed atmospheric processor. Marcus pushed aside chunks of twisted metal, his augmented arm servos whining under the strain. What he found made him step back in surprise. It was clearly alien in origin, but unlike anything in the databases. The creature was roughly panther-sized, covered in what appeared to be organic metal plating that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on the angle. Battle scars crisscrossed its form, telling stories of conflicts Marcus could only imagine. But what struck him most were its eyes, still faintly glowing with an inner light that suggested it might not be as dead as it appeared. Marcus had learned long ago to trust his instincts. During the Centauri campaign, those instincts had kept his unit alive when everything went wrong. Now they were telling him this wasn't just another piece of scrap metal. He activated his scanner, running it over the creature's form. The readings were chaotic, showing energy signatures that shouldn't exist in dead technology. The metal plating along its flank had been torn away, revealing complex circuitry underneath that pulsed weakly with bioluminescent patterns. This wasn't just a machine or just an animal. It was something that blurred the line between both. Marcus had heard rumors of such beings during his military service, whispered stories from deep space reconnaissance teams about creatures that were part biological, part technological, and entirely dangerous. But this one looked broken, abandoned, forgotten. Someone had dumped it here, expecting it to rust away with the rest of the unwanted debris. The thought made Marcus angry in a way he hadn't felt in years. He'd seen too many good soldiers left behind, too many lives treated as disposable. Whatever this creature was, it deserved better than slowly corroding in a junkyard. Marcus activated his comm unit and called his old friend Rodriguez, who ran a small research facility on the outskirts of the city. After explaining what he'd found, Rodriguez agreed to help transport the creature, though his voice carried clear skepticism about the whole enterprise. 2 hours later, a hover truck arrived with Rodriguez and his small team. They stood around the creature in amazement, scanning it with equipment far more sophisticated than Marcus's basic scanner. The readings confirmed what Marcus suspected. Whatever this being was, it wasn't entirely dead. Loading it onto the truck required careful maneuvering. The creature weighed more than its size suggested, and its metal plating was sharp enough to cut through standard loading equipment. Marcus insisted on riding in the back with it during transport, something about its stillness reminding him of wounded soldiers he'd carried off battlefields decades ago. During the ride to Rodriguez's facility, Marcus noticed something that made his breath catch. The creature's breathing was barely perceptible, but it was there. Whatever this being was, it was alive, just barely hanging on to existence. The realization filled him with a determination he hadn't felt since his military days. Rodriguez's facility was a converted warehouse filled with salvaged alien technology in various states of repair. They set up the creature in a clean room normally used for delicate electronics work. As they transferred it from the truck, Marcus thought he saw one of its eyes flicker, responding to the change in lighting. The preliminary scans revealed a biology unlike anything in Earth's databases. The creature's organs were a hybrid of organic tissue and nanotechnology, with its nervous system integrated into quantum processing nodes scattered throughout its body. Its metal plating wasn't armor, but rather a symbiotic skin that could apparently shift density and conductivity based on need. Most remarkably, the scans detected what appeared to be a sophisticated AI matrix embedded in its brain tissue. This wasn't just an alien animal. It was a sentient being with technology integrated at the cellular level. The implications were staggering, and Marcus realized he'd stumbled onto something that could change humanity's understanding of the galaxy. As night fell, Marcus sat beside the creature in the facility's main lab. Rodriguez and his team had gone home, leaving detailed instructions for monitoring its condition. The old veteran had volunteered to stay, claiming he wanted to make sure their equipment didn't malfunction. In truth, he couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was aware of its surroundings and shouldn't be left alone. Around midnight, Marcus was proven right. The creature's eyes opened fully for the first time, revealing irises that swirled with patterns of light that seemed almost hypnotic. It tried to move, managing only to lift its head slightly before the effort proved too much. But those eyes fixed on Marcus with an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. Marcus leaned forward slowly, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. He'd had enough experience with traumatized soldiers to recognize the signs. This being was afraid, confused, and probably in considerable pain. Whatever had happened to it before ending up in that junkyard had been traumatic enough to leave lasting damage. The creature's mouth opened slightly, and a sound emerged that was part electronic static, part organic growl. Marcus realized it was trying to communicate, though its systems were clearly damaged. He reached out carefully, stopping just short of touching its metal plating. Something extraordinary happened then. The creature's plating began to shift color, cycling through patterns that seemed almost like a visual language. Marcus felt a tingling sensation in his augmented arm, as if the creature's technology was somehow interfacing with his own cybernetic components. In that moment of connection, he sensed something that would haunt him for days to come. This being had been searching for something, traveling vast distances before whatever catastrophe had nearly destroyed it. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the massive construction site on Zephyria Prime. The alien world's twin suns beat down mercilessly on the crystalline structures rising from the purple soil. As head foreman for the Galactic Construction Consortium, he'd overseen projects across dozens of worlds, but nothing quite like this. The Zephyrian Empire had commissioned humanity's best engineers to build their new capital city. It was an honor that came with immense pressure. The Zephyrians were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, known for their strict traditions and elaborate ceremonies. Their current Empress, Lyreleth IX, was said to be even more traditional than her predecessors. Marcus adjusted his hard hat and walked toward the central plaza, where his crew was installing the foundation for the Empress's personal temple. The work was delicate, requiring precise placement of each ceremonial stone according to ancient Zephyrian blueprints that looked more like religious texts than engineering documents. "Boss, we've got a problem," called out Jake Morrison, his assistant foreman. The young man jogged over, his face flushed with concern. "The Zephyrian overseer is refusing to let us continue, says we're violating some sacred protocol." Marcus sighed. This was the third work stoppage this week due to cultural misunderstandings. The Zephyrians were incredibly particular about their traditions, and every day seemed to bring a new ritual requirement that hadn't been in the original specifications. As they walked toward the dispute, Marcus noticed a commotion near the ceremonial garden area. A crowd of Zephyrian workers had gathered, their tall, elegant forms creating a barrier around something. Their skin shimmered with agitation, shifting from the usual pale blue to deeper purple hues that indicated distress. "What's happening over there?" Marcus asked Jake, but before his assistant could answer, a bone-chilling howl echoed across the construction site. The sound was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It started low, almost subsonic, then rose to a piercing cry that seemed to vibrate through his bones. Every worker on the site, human and alien alike, stopped what they were doing and turned toward the source. "That's coming from the sacred grove," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. "The area we were told never to enter." Marcus had been briefed about the grove during his initial orientation. It was a small wooded area adjacent to the construction site that housed something the Zephyrians called their guardian. No human had ever been allowed inside, and the Zephyrians spoke of it only in hushed, reverent tones. Another howl split the air, this one filled with what sounded unmistakably like pain. Marcus felt his stomach clench. Whatever was making that sound was suffering. "We need to get back to work," Jake said nervously, glancing at the gathered Zephyrians. "This isn't our business." But Marcus couldn't shake the sound from his mind. In his 20 years of construction work, He'd developed an instinct for when something was wrong. Whether it was structural instability or equipment failure, he could sense danger before it became catastrophic. Right now, every instinct he had was screaming that something was terribly wrong in that grove. The howling continued, growing weaker with each cry. Marcus watched as several Zephyrian officials hurried toward the grove, their movements quick and agitated. He caught fragments of their rapid conversation in their musical language, recognizing only a few words he'd picked up during his time on the planet. Sick, dying, and forbidden were among the words he understood. "Boss, the Zephyrian overseer wants to speak with you," Jake said, pointing toward a tall alien approaching them. Kelveth was the Empress's appointed representative on the construction project, a stern individual who took protocol very seriously. "Foreman Chen," Kelveth said in accented but clear standard Galactic, his voice carrying the melodic quality typical of his species. "There is a disturbance in the sacred grove. Work must cease until it is resolved." "How long will that take?" Marcus asked, already calculating the delays this would cause to their timeline. Kelveth's skin shifted to a darker shade of blue. "Unknown. The Guardian is unwell. Our healers cannot determine the cause. If the Guardian dies, the Empress will not be able to consecrate this site. The entire project may be cancelled." Marcus felt his heart sink. Months of work, hundreds of jobs, and the reputation of human engineering were all hanging in the balance because of whatever was happening in that grove. "Is there anything we can do to help?" Marcus offered, though he expected the response. "Humans are forbidden from entering the sacred grove," Kelveth replied firmly. "Only those blessed by the Empress herself may approach the Guardian. We must wait for her arrival." As if summoned by his words, a sleek transport descended from the sky, its elegant curves marking it as a royal vessel. The ship landed in a clear area near the grove, and Marcus watched as a procession emerged. Even from a distance he could tell which figure was the Empress. She moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost otherworldly, her ceremonial robes flowing around her like liquid silver. Empress Lyraleth IX was taller than most of her species, her skin a pale, luminescent blue that seemed to glow in the alien sunlight. Intricate patterns were tattooed across her visible skin in darker blue ink, marking her royal status and spiritual achievements. Her eyes, visible even from Marcus's position, were a striking violet color that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. The howling from the grove had grown fainter, more desperate. Marcus clenched his fists as he listened to the sound of suffering. Every fiber of his being wanted to help, but he understood the cultural barriers. Violating Zephyrian sacred law wouldn't just end his career, it could cause a diplomatic incident that might damage human-Zephyrian relations for generations. But as another weak cry echoed from the grove, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes, he thought, doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. He began walking toward the sacred grove, ignoring Jake's urgent calls behind him and the shocked gasps of the Zephyrian workers. With each step, he knew he was crossing a line from which there might be no return. The sacred grove was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Ancient trees with silver bark and luminescent leaves created a natural cathedral, their branches intertwining overhead to form intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The air itself felt different here, thick with an energy that made his skin tingle, but Marcus barely noticed the ethereal beauty around him. His attention was focused entirely on the creature lying in the center of a natural clearing ahead. It was massive, easily the size of a small transport vehicle, with a body that seemed to blend the features of a wolf with something far more alien. Its fur was deep black with streaks of silver that caught the filtered light, and its 6 legs ended in claws that could easily tear through metal. But what struck Marcus most was the intelligence in its eyes. These weren't the eyes of a simple predator. They held a depth of awareness that spoke of centuries of wisdom. The Guardian was clearly in agony. Its breathing was labored, and a strange purple substance oozed from several wounds along its flanks. The injuries looked infected, with angry red edges that suggested they'd been festering for days. Around the creature, a group of Zephyrian healers worked frantically. They chanted in their musical language while waving crystalline instruments over the Guardian's body, but their methods seemed to be having little effect. The creature's breathing grew more shallow with each passing moment. "You cannot be here, human." One of the healers noticed Marcus and rushed toward him, his skin flashing with alarm. "This is forbidden. You must leave immediately." But Marcus was already moving, his construction worker's instincts taking over. He'd seen injuries like this before, though never on an alien creature. During his early years working demolition, he'd watched several workers suffer from toxic exposure when they'd accidentally disturbed old chemical storage sites. "Those wounds," Marcus said, pointing at the Guardian's flanks. "They're not healing because there's something foreign in them, something that's poisoning the blood." The healer looked confused, his translator struggling with Marcus's technical terminology. Behind them, Marcus heard the sound of approaching footsteps and raised voices. The Empress and her retinue had undoubtedly been alerted to his trespass. Without waiting for permission, Marcus knelt beside the Guardian. The creature's eyes fixed on him, and for a moment Marcus felt as though he was being evaluated by an intelligence far older and wiser than himself. The Guardian made a soft sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Somehow Marcus understood it was giving him permission to help. "Jake," Marcus called over his shoulder. "I need my emergency medical kit from the site office, now." "Boss, you can't," Jake started to protest. "Now." Marcus barked with the authority of a foreman used to being obeyed in crisis situations. Despite his obvious fear of violating Zephyrian law, Jake ran toward the construction site. Marcus examined the wounds more closely. His suspicions were confirmed when he saw small metallic fragments embedded in the flesh. The purple oozing wasn't just infected tissue. It was the Guardian's body trying to reject foreign material that was slowly poisoning it. "The pain is from metal shards," Marcus explained to the confused healers. "Probably from construction debris that got blown into the grove during one of our excavations. The body is rejecting them, but they're too deep for natural healing." Empress Lyrelith appeared at the edge of the clearing, her violet eyes wide with shock at seeing a human touching her sacred guardian. Her retinue surrounded her, many with their hands on ceremonial weapons, but she held up a hand to stop them from advancing. "Human." Her voice was like music, even when filled with authority and anger. "You violate the most sacred laws of our people. Explain yourself before I have you executed." Marcus looked up from the Guardian, meeting the Empress's gaze directly. "Your Guardian is dying because of something my people's work caused. I can save it, but I need to remove the metal fragments that are poisoning its system." "Our healers have tried everything," the Empress replied coldly. "They are trained in arts that span millennia. What could a simple human construction worker possibly know that they do not?" "I know about industrial accidents," Marcus said simply. "I know what happens when construction materials contaminate living tissue. This isn't magic or medicine, it's basic toxicology." Jake returned, running at full speed with Marcus's emergency kit. The young man's face was pale with terror as he realized he was now also violating sacred law. But his loyalty to his foreman overrode his fear. Marcus opened the kit and pulled out a pair of magnetic extraction tools. They were designed for removing metal splinters from workers who'd been injured by flying debris. But they should work on the Guardian as well. "If I'm wrong," Marcus said to the Empress as he prepared the tools, "then you can execute me for violating your sacred grove. But if I'm right and your Guardian lives, then maybe we can find a way to work together that honors both our peoples." The Guardian made another soft sound and shifted slightly, presenting its wounded flank more clearly to Marcus. The gesture was unmistakable. The creature was asking for his help. Empress Lyrelith studied Marcus for a long moment, her violet eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. Finally, she nodded once. "Proceed, human, but know that if the Guardian dies by your hand, your death will be neither quick nor merciful." Marcus activated the magnetic extractor and began the delicate work of removing the embedded metal fragments. Each piece that came free was followed by a fresh flow of purple blood, but gradually the color began to change, becoming cleaner and brighter. The Guardian's breathing began to stabilize. Its eyes, which had been dulled with pain, started to regain their brilliant clarity. As the last fragment came free, the creature lifted its massive head and looked directly at Marcus. What happened next shocked everyone present. The Guardian, this sacred creature that was revered as a divine protector, leaned forward and gently touched its nose to Marcus's hand. The gesture was unmistakably one of gratitude and affection. A collective gasp rose from the Zephyrian witnesses. Even the Empress stepped back in amazement. In all of their recorded history, the Guardian had never shown such favor to anyone outside the royal bloodline. "Impossible," whispered one of the healers. "The Guardian chooses its own. It cannot be influenced or commanded. For it to show such acceptance to an outsider." Empress Lyrelith's expression had changed completely. The anger and authority were still there, but now they were mixed with something else: wonder, and perhaps the beginning of respect. "It seems," she said slowly, "that we must reconsider what we thought we knew about humans." The healing chamber within the Empress's temporary residence was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. Crystalline walls pulsed with soft bioluminescent patterns, and the air hummed with energy that seemed to promote cellular regeneration. The Guardian lay on a raised platform in the center, its breathing now strong and steady. Marcus sat in an ornate chair that seemed to have been grown rather than built, feeling completely out of place among the alien luxury. 24 hours had passed since he'd saved the Guardian's life, and the political ramifications were still unfolding. "The Council of Elders is not pleased," Empress Lyrelith said as she entered the chamber. Gone were the ceremonial robes from the day before, replaced by simpler garments that somehow made her seem more approachable. "A human touching the sacred Guardian violates laws that have stood for 3,000 years. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I understand the gravity of what I did, Your Majesty. I was prepared to face the consequences. Were you?" The Empress moved to stand beside the Guardian, running her hand along its flank where the wounds were already beginning to heal. "Do you understand that some of my advisors are calling for your execution? That others demand the immediate termination of all human contracts with our empire?" The Guardian opened one eye and fixed it on Marcus, making a sound that was almost like a purr. The Empress noticed the interaction and her expression softened slightly. "However," she continued, "there are also those who see this event as a sign. The Guardian has never shown such favor to anyone outside the royal bloodline. Some interpret this as a divine indication that humans are more than we previously believed." Marcus had spent most of the previous day under guard, giving him plenty of time to think about the situation. He'd made his decision based on instinct and compassion, but now he was beginning to understand the larger implications. "What do you believe, Your Majesty?" he asked. Lyrelith was quiet for a long moment, studying both Marcus and the Guardian. "I believe that yesterday I witnessed something unprecedented. You risked your life to save a creature you'd never seen before, using knowledge that our ancient healers lacked. More importantly, you did so without thought of reward or recognition." She moved closer to Marcus, her violet eyes intense. "Tell me, Foreman Chen, what drives humans to act as you did? In our studies of your species, we've noted this tendency toward what you call heroism, but we've never understood its source." Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think it comes from our history, Your Majesty. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We succeeded not because we were the strongest or fastest, but because we never gave up. We kept going when other species would have quit. That drive to persist, to keep trying even when the situation seems hopeless, it's become part of who we are. But the Guardian is not human. Saving it gained you nothing." "That's exactly why it mattered," Marcus replied. "The best parts of humanity show themselves when we help others with no expectation of return. It's what makes us who we are." The Guardian suddenly lifted its head, looking toward the chamber's entrance. Its ears, which Marcus only now noticed were more pointed than a terrestrial wolf's, swiveled to track something approaching. "The council comes," Lyrelith said, her expression becoming formal once again. "They will demand answers and judgment." A group of elderly Zephyrians entered the chamber, their elaborate robes indicating their high status. Their skin showed deeper blue patterns than Marcus had seen before, marking them as beings of great age and wisdom. The lead counselor, a female whose skin had an almost metallic sheen, stepped forward. "Empress," she said in formal tones, "we have deliberated on the humans' violation of sacred law. The precedent is clear. Death is the only acceptable punishment for defiling the Guardian's presence." Marcus felt his mouth go dry, but he forced himself to remain calm. He'd known this was a possibility from the moment he'd entered the grove. "However," the counselor continued, "the Guardian's unprecedented response complicates matters. Never in our recorded history has it shown such favor to an outsider. Some among us believe this indicates divine approval of the human's actions. Another counselor, this one male with intricate scarring across his visible skin, stepped forward. The law is absolute, Counselor Vithara. Divine sign or not, the human must face justice for his transgression. The Guardian rose from its resting platform, moving with fluid grace despite its recent injuries. It walked to Marcus and sat beside him, leaning its massive bulk against the human's chair. The message was unmistakable. The creature was claiming Marcus as its own. The council members fell silent, staring in amazement. Even Counselor Vithara, who had seemed confident in her position, appeared shaken by this display. The Guardian has chosen, Empress Lyrillith said quietly. In all our laws and traditions, this supersedes any other consideration. The human is now under the Guardian's protection. But what does this mean for the law? Asked the scarred counselor. If we make an exception for one human, what precedent does that set? Lyrillith looked thoughtful. Perhaps it means our laws need to evolve. The Guardian sees something in this human that we initially missed. Maybe it's time we looked more carefully at what humanity has to offer. Marcus felt the weight of the moment. Entire civilizations had been shaped by smaller decisions than this one. He thought about his crew, about the construction project, about the future relationships between humans and Zephyrians. Your Majesty, he said carefully. If I may suggest something? The Empress nodded for him to continue. The problem that caused this crisis was miscommunication. Our construction work inadvertently threatened the Guardian, because we didn't fully understand the sacred grove's boundaries or how our activities might affect it. Perhaps we could establish a new protocol, joint oversight teams with both human and Zephyrian members to prevent similar incidents. Counselor Vithara's eyes narrowed. You propose to insert human presence into our sacred planning? I propose that we learn from each other, Marcus replied. Humans have technical knowledge that could benefit your people, while Zephyrians have cultural wisdom that we clearly need to understand better. The Guardian's acceptance suggests that cooperation might be possible. The Guardian made a soft sound and gently butted its head against Marcus's shoulder, as if endorsing his suggestion. The gesture wasn't lost on the assembled council. A partnership of equals, Lyrillith mused, rather than the traditional contractor-client relationship. Interesting. The implications could extend far beyond this construction project, Vithara said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. If humans proved capable of truly understanding our ways, Marcus sensed an opportunity. We're willing to learn, Your Majesty, and we're willing to teach. Human persistence and Zephyrian wisdom combined could accomplish things neither species could achieve alone. The Empress looked at the Guardian, which had settled comfortably beside Marcus and then at her council. A decision was forming in her violet eyes, one that would reshape the relationship between their species. Very well, she said. We shall try this experiment in cooperation. But know this, Marcus Chen, you will be personally responsible for its success. The Guardian has chosen you as our bridge between species. Do not disappoint either of us. The Kepler 442b Advanced Team's transport ship shuddered as it entered the planet's turbulent atmosphere. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the surface below, a world of constant storms and chemical-stained landscapes that had defeated 3 previous colonization attempts by other species. Atmospheric. Composition is even worse than the reports indicated, announced Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's chief atmospheric specialist. Sulfuric acid concentrations are 12% above projected levels, and the electromagnetic storms are interfering with standard navigation systems. Marcus gripped his safety harness as another wave of turbulence rocked the ship. Beside him, Architect Thylos remained calm, his skin showing the pale blue of concentration as he studied incoming sensor data. The storm patterns are not random, Thylos observed. There's a natural rhythm to the electromagnetic pulses. If we can synchronize our systems with the planet's energy cycles rather than fighting them, that's brilliant, Marcus said, understanding immediately. Instead of shielding against the storms, we use them as a power source. The Guardian, secured in a specially designed harness, made a soft sound of agreement. The creature had insisted on joining the advanced team, despite concerns about the hostile environment. Empress Lyrillith had eventually relented, believing that the Guardian's presence was essential to the mission's success. Landing in 30 seconds, called the pilot, a veteran human spacer named Rodriguez who'd volunteered for the dangerous mission. Everyone hold on. This is going to be rough. The ship touched down with a bone-jarring impact on the designated landing site, a relatively flat area that still trembled with seismic activity. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the alien landscape in detail for the first time. The sky was a sickly yellow-green, and the ground was covered with formations that looked like crystallized lightning. Environmental suits are mandatory, Dr. Kim announced as the team prepared to disembark. The atmosphere is lethal to both human and Zephyrian physiology without protection. The Guardian couldn't wear a traditional environmental suit, but Zephyrian bioengineers had developed a specialized energy field generator that would protect the creature during surface operations. As they activated the device, a shimmering barrier appeared around the Guardian's body. First priority is establishing a protected base camp, Marcus said as the team gathered their equipment. We need to prove that sustained habitation is possible before we can begin actual construction. The advance team consisted of 12 individuals, 6 humans, and 6 Zephyrians, all specialists in their fields. Dr. Kim and her counterpart, bioharmonist Velith, would handle atmospheric and environmental challenges. Engineers Jake Morrison and crystal shaper Nexoth would focus on structural solutions. The remaining team members specialized in everything from geology to communications. As they stepped onto the planet's surface, Marcus felt the full hostility of the environment. Even through his environmental suit, he could sense the chemical storms raging overhead and the unstable geology beneath his feet. This was a world that didn't want to be colonized. Seismic sensors are detecting constant micro-tremors, reported geologist Dr. Martinez. The entire crust is unstable. Traditional foundations won't work here. Then we don't use traditional foundations, Marcus replied. He'd been thinking about this problem during the journey to Kepler 442b. What if we build structures that move with the seismic activity instead of resisting it? Thylos's skin brightened with interest. Flexible architecture. Our ancestors built similar structures on the floating islands of our homeworld storm seas. And human earthquake engineering has developed techniques for buildings that can flex without breaking. Jake added, if we combine those approaches. The Guardian wandered away from the group, sniffing at strange crystalline formations that dotted the landscape. Marcus watched nervously as the creature approached one of the larger formations, but suddenly stopped and backed away with a warning growl. Guardian senses danger, Velith said, her skin showing the orange patterns of alarm. Those crystals are not natural formations. Dr. Kim hurried over with her atmospheric sensors, scanning the crystal formation the Guardian had avoided. Her readings made her gasp. These aren't crystals, they're some kind of preserved life form, and they're still showing biological activity. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Kepler 442b wasn't just hostile. It was inhabited by something that had adapted to the extreme conditions. Are they intelligent? Marcus asked, moving closer but keeping a respectful distance from the formation. Unknown, Dr. Kim replied, but the complexity of their structure suggests a sophisticated form of life. They've somehow evolved to thrive in an environment that's lethal to most known species. Thylos approached one of the smaller formations, studying it with the careful attention of an artist examining a masterpiece. The geometric patterns in their structure are mathematically complex. This could be a form of silicon-based intelligence. The Guardian moved between the team and the crystal beings, positioning itself protectively. Its instincts were clearly warning of potential danger, but it wasn't showing aggression, more like cautious respect. We need to establish communication protocols before we proceed with colonization, Marcus decided. If these beings are intelligent, we can't just start building on their world without their consent. Jake looked surprised. Boss, our mission is to establish a colony. The Galactic Council is expecting results. The Galactic Council is expecting us to prove that human-Zephyrian cooperation can solve impossible problems, Marcus corrected. If we can establish peaceful contact with a silicon-based intelligence that's adapted to survive in conditions that killed previous colonization attempts, that's an even bigger achievement than just building a colony. Dr. Kim was continuing her scans of the crystal beings, her excitement growing with each reading. Their energy signatures are incredible. They're not just surviving the electromagnetic storms, they're feeding on them. The storms that make this planet uninhabitable for most species are actually their primary energy source. Velith approached one of the formations with her bioharmonic sensors, devices that could detect life energy patterns invisible to human technology. "There is consciousness here," she announced, her skin showing patterns of wonder. "Complex, ancient, and very much aware of our presence." As if responding to her words, the crystal formation began to glow with internal light. The illumination spread from one formation to another across the landscape, creating a network of communication that stretched beyond the horizon. "They're talking to each other," whispered Jake in amazement. "About us." The Guardian made a sound unlike anything Marcus had heard from the creature before, a low musical tone that seemed to harmonize with the energy patterns flowing through the crystal beings. The formation's glow shifted in response, their light patterns becoming more complex and rhythmic. "The Guardian is attempting communication," Thylos said, his skin showing the deep blue of profound respect. "It recognizes them as fellow ancient beings." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's hostile atmosphere. They were witnessing first contact between three intelligent species, and he was responsible for the outcome. The decisions made in the next few hours could determine whether this became a historic moment of peaceful cooperation or a diplomatic disaster that would end the human-Zephyrian partnership. "Dr. Kim, can you analyze the frequency patterns of their communication?" Marcus asked. "If we can understand their language, maybe we can explain why we're here." "Already on it," she replied, her instruments working frantically to decode the crystal being's light-based communication system. The patterns are mathematical in nature, but incredibly complex. It might take days to establish basic communication protocols. Suddenly, one of the larger crystal formations began to change shape, its surface flowing like liquid while maintaining its essential structure. Within moments, it had reconfigured itself into a rough approximation of the Guardian's form. The message was clear. The crystal beings understood that the Guardian was the leader of their group, and they were attempting to communicate in a form it would recognize. The Guardian approached the transformed crystal being slowly, respectfully. When it was close enough, the creature touched its nose to the crystal surface. Immediately, both beings began to glow with synchronized light patterns. "Incredible," breathed Velith. "They're sharing consciousness directly. The Guardian is learning their language." The communication lasted for several minutes, during which the entire team watched in awed silence. Finally, the Guardian stepped back and the crystal being returned to its original form. The Guardian turned to Marcus and made a series of sounds, more complex than its usual vocalizations. Somehow Marcus understood the meaning. "They've been waiting," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "The crystal beings have been waiting for someone who could help them reach the stars." Thylos's skin showed rapid pattern changes indicating excitement and confusion. "Waiting for us? But how could they know we were coming?" Marcus looked at the Guardian, understanding beginning to dawn. "Because they've been receiving the electromagnetic signals from galactic civilization for centuries. They've been listening to our communications." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of Marcus's report from Kepler 442b. Representatives from 47 species filled the massive chamber aboard the orbital station above the neutral world of Concordia Prime. The tension in the air was palpable as species that had maintained careful diplomatic balance for centuries were forced to confront something unprecedented. Marcus stood at the center of the speaking platform, feeling incredibly small beneath the towering galleries where delegates observed from their species-specific environmental pods. Beside him, Empress Laralith maintained her regal composure despite the obvious hostility from several delegations. The Guardian lay at their feet, its massive form somehow conveying both power and peaceful intent. "The human's report is preposterous," declared Ambassador Zekthul of the Nexari Federation, his mechanical voice amplified through the chamber's translation system. "3 species collaborating as equals? Impossible. The natural order of galactic civilization is built on established hierarchies." Murmurs of agreement rippled through several delegations, but Marcus also noticed signs of interest from others. The Aquatic Collective's representative was studying him intently, while the Hive Mind Union's spokesman was engaged in rapid internal consultation with its collective consciousness. "If I may address the council," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "what we've discovered on Kepler 442b isn't just about 3 species working together. It's about solving problems that none of us could handle alone." He activated the holographic display system, showing images from the planet's surface. The crystal beings appeared in their full alien glory, their structures gleaming with internal light against the hostile landscape. The crystalline entities have been monitoring galactic communications for over 800 years, Marcus continued. They've developed technologies that allow them to thrive in environments that would kill most known life forms. But they've also reached the limits of what they can achieve alone. Delegate Mordesh of the Ancient Assembly leaned forward in his environmental pod. You speak of technology sharing, human. What could these primitive crystal formations possibly offer advanced galactic civilization? Marcus smiled, having anticipated this question. They can manipulate electromagnetic energy on a planetary scale. They don't just survive those massive storms on Kepler 442b, they control them. With their help, we've already begun construction of structures that are powered by environmental energy, rather than fighting against it. The holographic display shifted to show early construction footage from the past month. Buildings rose from the planet's surface like living things, their walls rippling with energy patterns that matched the storms overhead. Instead of the sterile artificial structures typical of galactic colonies, these buildings seemed to grow organically, from the landscape itself. Impossible, whispered someone from the Technocratic Coalition delegation. The structures are actually becoming more stable over time, Marcus continued. The crystal being's energy manipulation allows the buildings to adapt to changing conditions. What you're seeing is architecture that evolves to meet environmental challenges. Empress Lyraleth stepped forward to address the council. The partnership between our species has already produced innovations that surpass anything we've achieved individually. The addition of crystalline expertise has accelerated our progress beyond all projections. But Ambassador Zekthul was not convinced. Even if this so-called cooperation produces results, it violates every principle of galactic order. Species maintain their distinct identities and territories. Mixing of cultures leads to chaos and conflict. The Guardian suddenly lifted its head, looking directly at Zekthul's delegation pod. The creature made a low sound that somehow conveyed both warning and sadness. Marcus felt a chill as he realized the Guardian sensed something the rest of them had missed. What troubles you, old friend? Lyraleth asked softly, placing her hand on the Guardian's neck. The creature rose to its feet and walked to the center of the speaking platform. For a moment it stood perfectly still, then threw back its head and produced a sound unlike anything it had made before. A deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. The response was immediate and shocking. Every environmental pod in the chamber began displaying the same message simultaneously. Incoming transmission. Origin Kepler 442b system. The main holographic display activated on its own, showing the familiar landscape of the colony world. But something was wrong. The crystal beings were glowing more brightly than ever before, and their light patterns showed urgency and fear. A new voice filled the chamber, somehow transmitted through the crystal being's electromagnetic manipulation abilities. The words were translated into every species' language simultaneously. Council of the Galaxy, the voice began, its tone ancient and wise. We are the resonance, the collective consciousness you know as crystal beings. We speak to you now because time grows short. The chamber fell completely silent. First contact with a new intelligence during a council session was unprecedented. For 8 centuries we have observed your civilizations. We have seen the rise and fall of alliances, the wars over territory and resources, the careful balance of power that prevents cooperation. But now we have also seen something new. The holographic display showed images of humans and Zephyrians working together on Kepler 442b, their collaborative efforts producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The humans call it persistence. The Zephyrians call it harmony. We call it evolution, the natural progression of consciousness beyond the limitations of single-species thinking. Ambassador Zekthul was frantically working his console, but the transmission continued despite his attempts to block it. But there is another reason we speak to you now. Our planetary monitoring systems have detected something approaching your galaxy, a force that has consumed 17 other galactic civilizations. They are drawn to the electromagnetic signatures of advanced technology, and they will arrive in your galaxy within 50 of your standard years. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. A galactic threat that could consume entire civilizations was exactly the kind of crisis that would require unprecedented cooperation to survive. The Coming darkness cannot be fought by individual species, protecting their territories. It cannot be defeated by the careful balance of power that has defined your civilization. It can only be overcome by the kind of unity we have witnessed on Kepler 442b. The holographic display shifted to show star charts marking the path of the approaching threat. The scale was terrifying, entire star systems going dark as something moved between them. The choice before you is simple. Continue your traditional isolation and face extinction, or embrace the evolution that the humans, Zephyrians, and Resonants have begun. Learn to combine your strengths instead of hoarding them. Become something greater than the sum of your parts. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Marcus looked around at the delegates, seeing fear and uncertainty on every face that was visible through the environmental pods. Finally, Delegate Mordesh spoke. If this threat is real, then everything changes. The luxury of maintaining separate development becomes a pathway to extinction. The Resonants could be lying, Zekthul protested, but his mechanical voice lacked its earlier conviction. The Guardian believed them immediately, Lyrelith pointed out. And the Guardian has never been wrong about threats to galactic civilization. Marcus stepped forward again, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. Whether the threat is real or not, we've already proven that cooperation produces better results than isolation. The question isn't whether we can afford to work together, it's whether we can afford not to. The Guardian moved to stand beside him, its presence somehow lending authority to his words. Around the chamber, Marcus could see delegates beginning to reassess everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization. The vote, when it came, would determine not just the fate of the Kepler 442b colony, but the future of every sentient species in the galaxy. 5 years after the Galactic Council's historic decision to embrace interspecies cooperation, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Harmony Station, the first truly multi-species facility ever constructed. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, he could see the bustling activity of New Concordia, a city that existed both on the planet's surface and in the orbital rings above it. The city was a testament to what unified galactic civilization could achieve. Zephyrian bioarchitecture grew seamlessly into human engineering marvels, while crystalline energy networks powered everything with unprecedented efficiency. Representatives from 37 species had contributed to the design, creating something that transcended any single culture's vision. Still hard to believe sometimes, Jake said, joining Marcus at the viewport. His former assistant had become the director of interspecies engineering, overseeing construction projects across 12 star systems. Remember when our biggest worry was getting the Empress's temple built on schedule? Marcus smiled, watching as a group of young beings from 6 different species worked together on an engineering project in the station's educational facility below. Sometimes I think that was the easy part. The Guardian padded onto the observation deck, moving with the same fluid grace it had possessed in the sacred grove years ago. The creature was showing its age now, silver more prominent in its dark fur, but its eyes remained as bright and intelligent as ever. Behind it came Empress Lyrelith, who had evolved from a traditional ruler into something unprecedented, the first interspecies chancellor, elected by unanimous vote of the Galactic Assembly. The deep space monitoring stations have detected the first signs, she said without preamble, her violet eyes serious. Long-range sensors are picking up the electromagnetic disturbances the Resonants warned us about. The Devourers are approximately 12 years out from the galactic rim. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. For 5 years they'd been preparing for this moment, but the reality of it was still terrifying. The Devourers, as the Resonants had named the approaching threat, had consumed 17 previous galactic civilizations. Their pattern was always the same. They arrived, stripped worlds of all electromagnetic energy and complex matter, then moved on, leaving nothing but dead space in their wake. "How are the preparations going?" Marcus asked. "Better than we dared hope," Lyrelith replied. The Unified Defense Network is operational in 63 star systems. The new ships built with combined technologies are performing beyond all projections. Most importantly, the species integration protocols are working. We're actually functioning as a unified civilization. This was the miracle that none of them had fully believed possible 5 years ago. The vote to embrace interspecies cooperation had been close. 24 species in favor, 19 opposed with 4 abstentions. But once the decision was made, The transformation had been remarkable. The Nexari Federation, initially the strongest opponents of cooperation, had become some of its most effective advocates once they realized that their mechanical precision, combined with organic creativity, produced unprecedented technological breakthroughs. The ancient assembly had contributed knowledge from civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Even the typically isolationist void dwellers had emerged from their hidden settlements to join the united effort. There's something else, Lyrolith continued. The Resonance Collective has made a discovery about the Devourer's nature. They're not entirely what we thought. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Meaning? They're not a natural phenomenon. They're the remnant of a galactic civilization that tried to achieve unity through conquest and absorption, rather than cooperation. They became so focused on consuming other species' knowledge and abilities that they lost their own identity. Now they're trapped in an endless cycle of consumption, unable to stop or change course. The implications were staggering. So they're not evil, they're addicted, compelled to consume because it's the only way they know how to exist. Which means they might be saved, Jake said, understanding immediately. If we can break their compulsion, show them a different way to achieve unity. The Guardian made a soft sound, looking out at the bustling city below. Marcus followed its gaze and saw what the creature was observing. Beings from dozens of species working together, learning from each other, creating something greater than any of them could achieve alone. It was exactly what the Devourers had been trying to accomplish, but through cooperation instead of conquest. The Resonance believes it might be possible, Lyrolith confirmed, but it would require getting close enough to communicate with them, and that means risking everything we've built. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. It had started with a simple act of compassion in a sacred grove, when he'd chosen to help a suffering creature despite the consequences. That choice had led to everything that followed: the partnership with the Zephyrians, the discovery of the Resonance, the transformation of galactic civilization itself. What does the Guardian think? He asked, looking at the ancient creature. The Guardian lifted its head and looked directly at Marcus, its eyes holding the same wisdom that had guided him through every crucial decision of the past 5 years. The creature made a sound that Marcus had learned to interpret as agreement and determination. It believes we have to try, Marcus said, not just to defend ourselves but to help them find a better way. The risk is enormous, Lyrolith warned. If we're wrong about their nature, if they can't be reached, we could lose everything. Marcus looked out at New Concordia again, at the impossible sight of dozens of species working together in harmony. Children from different worlds played together in the parks. Scientists from incompatible environments collaborated through advanced interface technology. Artists created works that blended aesthetic traditions from across the galaxy. We've already proven that impossible things can happen when different species choose to trust each other, he said. Maybe it's time to find out if that includes the Devourers, Jake nodded slowly. The construction crews are ready. If we're going to do this, we'll need to build the most advanced ships ever conceived. Vessels that can serve as both defensive platforms and communication arrays. The Resonance has volunteered to serve as the primary communication interface, Lyrolith added. Their electromagnetic manipulation abilities are the only technology we have that might be able to reach the Devourer's consciousness. The Guardian rose to its feet and walked to the viewport, pressing its nose against the transparent surface. For a moment it stood perfectly still, then turned back to the group and made a sound that conveyed both urgency and hope. It's time, Marcus said, understanding the creature's message. We've spent 5 years preparing for this moment. Now we find out if cooperation is strong enough to overcome conquest. As they prepared to leave the observation deck, Marcus took one last look at the thriving civilization below. Everything they'd built, everything they'd learned about working together would soon be put to the ultimate test. But for the first time since learning about the Devourers, he felt genuinely hopeful. They'd already achieved the impossible once. The sacred guardian that had chosen to trust a human construction worker had become the symbol of the most successful interspecies cooperation in galactic history. If that miracle was possible, then maybe, just maybe, they could work another one. The fate of the galaxy would depend on whether the lesson of the sacred grove could be applied on a cosmic scale. Sometimes, the most important thing you could do was extend your hand to help a suffering creature. even when everything you'd been taught said it was impossible. Especially then,